So, a little introspection, seriously, is what needs to happen on the part of the many who are saying, why don't people trust us? All right, so this particular article crossed my radar courtesy of a combination of social media and just general browsing that I do on science articles. Wow, was my immediate reaction to that, and just reading it. And first off, I want to make a note here. This is PLOS Biology. And PLOS is just is a lot alike to Nature in that it's a family of journals. So, there's different PLOS journals. Like there's a PLOS Climate, for instance, if I was wanting to publish there, and any number of different things. So there's lots of PLOS articles, which means that this journal typically publishes peer-reviewed research. This is not peer-reviewed research, as you might guess from my reaction. This is a perspective article, and to their credit, they labeled it so. But this is extremely interesting. And, for the record, I'll say it up front, for those in this channel who've been longtime viewers know this, that I am politically conservative myself, but I am also a climate scientist. So I get slings and arrows from everybody on a regular basis. Anyway. So this is certainly interesting for me to see this. And we're going to read through this a little bit, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts and commentary along the way here. There is troubling new expansion of anti-science aggression in the United States. It's arising from far-right extremism, including some elected members of the U.S. Congress and conservative news outlets that target prominent biological scientists fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. Right. Whatever. A band of ultra-conservative members of Congress and other public health officials with far-right leanings are waging organized and seemingly well-coordinated attacks on prominent U.S. biological scientists. In parallel, conservative news outlets repeatedly and purposefully promote disinformation designed to portray key American scientists as enemies. As a consequence, many of us receive threats via email and on social media, while some are stalked at home, to create an unprecedented culture of anti-science intimidation. Okay, first off there, I don't support any of that. It's not right for any of those things to happen. That people should get threats, that people should get harassed, nobody should be doxxed, none of that. I'm totally against it. Stop doing it. People, stop doing it. My immediate question, though, is what is disinformation? Because you give me no definition, Mr. Hotez. Is disinformation something that you dislike? Well, I'm guessing you dislike disinformation. That was a pointless question. But if you have disinformation here, okay, wait a second. Is it disinformation because it's information that you don't like, or you don't think is true, or any kind of thing, or is it quite simply an opinion that you don't like? Just point of question here. Over the spring and summer of 2021, four major incidences stand out. First, Georgia Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced House Bill 2316, the Fire Fauci Act, called for halting the payment of Dr. Fauci's salary as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and auditing his digital correspondence and financial transactions. Greene's follow-up press conference on June 21st, 2021 included 13 Republican House supporters or co-sponsors, possibly the largest congressional delegation in modern times, to single out and attempt to humiliate a prominent American scientist. Also in June, the Republicans organized a House Select Subcommittee on the origins of COVID-19 with the presumption that it was ignited by gain-of-function and genetic engineering research from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, despite evidence pointing to spillover from a viral infection in bats to additional mammals that ultimately humans accounting for previous coronavirus epidemics. The hearings took a sinister tone, pointing features at virologists both in the U.S. and China. Representative Jim Jordan stated that Dr. Fauci was, quote, afraid of something and falsely claimed that he was covering up the engineering of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The far-right media harasses or stalks other prominent scientists, including Dr. Peter Daszak, who heads the EcoHealth Alliance and conducts research on zoonotic origins of human virus infections. Vaccines and vaccine scientists were also targeted. Alongside the June Republican COVID-19 origins hearings, Senator Ron Johnson organized a roundtable in Milwaukee to highlight the rare adverse side effects from COVID-19 vaccines as evening Fox News anchors promoted fake claims regarding deaths from COVID-19 vaccinations. In July, Representative Green declared on Twitter that COVID-19 vaccine is a political tool, quote, a political tool to control people, while Representative Madison Cawthorn said that door-to-door COVID-19 vaccinations were just a step away from U.S. government confiscations of guns and Bibles, and Representative Lauren Boebert referred to vaccinators as needle Nazis. Her words, not mine, YouTube. Days later, the medical director for vaccines in the Tennessee Department of Health was abruptly terminated for her efforts to vaccinate minors 14 and up without parental consent. We'll get back to that in a second. These actions were concurrent with state efforts to halt the vaccine advocacy and outreach to teens and adolescents at a time when the Delta variant is accelerating. As a vaccine scientist and author of a book explaining my autism, including my daughter's autism, is unrelated to vaccines, I am also a target of anti-vaccine activists, including those who write menacingly about patriots who will seek me out. During a June 2021 interview with the staunchly conservative Florida governor, a Fox News anchor referred to me as infamous and notorious. Okay. So I'm going to say for these, yes, they were stupid. Don't get me wrong. They were absolutely stupid things that were said. Stupid things that were done. Stupid things that were political stunts. Not to make it belabor the point here, but so just because they were political stunts there doesn't mean you have the right to harass them in return, and doesn't mean it's necessarily anti-science either. Here, as much as it's a political stunt. Despite evidence pointing to spillover from... Okay, this I gotta point out, because despite evidence pointing to spillover in the national epidemics and what have you, yes, I know that peer-reviewed study is there, but seeing as that's probably one of, I think, 2 peer-reviewed studies that you have actually used here that are not something of your own anyway, I want to point this out that didn't the Biden administration just suddenly change on that? This was only a couple of weeks ago. I'm immensely surprised that the author of this thing would not even bring it up himself, considering that he is also cited now many times. He cites many times in this article PolitiFact, Salon, other things that are not peer-reviewed to make his points, rather than to actually focus on peer-reviewed stuff himself. He cites very, very little here to support his claim. And also some other things that I'm going to get to in a minute. But, let's see here. Let's go back to that. But anyway, I'm going to say that's CNN too, which frankly I don't find very good anyway. But, yeah, CNN brought this up, right? That, they're actually finding that idea that it could have leaked from the lab as something credible just in the last couple of weeks. CNN, not exactly right wing. Anyway, let's see. Just thinking, what else do I want to comment on? Okay. I'm gonna have to say that he's I'm not gonna say cherry picking, but he is looking at some very specific things. Very specific comments that people have made. And I think, Mr. Hotez, and I respect what you've done. This is different. I respect what you've done with vaccines and, talking about how it's unrelated to autism. And I totally follow that. I understand that. And vaccines have nothing to do with autism. I get it. At the same time, the COVID-19 vaccine, many people don't want it because it is still an experimental vaccine. It hasn't been fully approved by the FDA. And for some of the data and things like that with kids, where they are much less likely to get it, much less likely to have a severe case of illness or death unless there's an underlying condition, they don't want to give something to their kid that their kid may not necessarily need. And where these people are getting annoyed, which is what you are not looking at when you're understanding why people could be so angry, let alone, lead to some of these comments from officials who are probably hearing from their constituents about how they're sick of people forcing the vaccine on them. That is not anti-science necessarily. It is not anti-science to not want to take a particular vaccine. In fact, I would actually say it's very pro-science to want to talk to your doctor and make that choice of whether or not the vaccine is right for you. I got the vaccine. I think it's a good idea if people do get the vaccine. I also understand that a friend of mine is actually highly allergic to a lot of the things in vaccines and she can't take it. Other things like that happen. And I think you are very, very much forgetting that when people are saying you have to get the vaccine, you have to get the vaccine, you have to get the vaccine, but you're not accounting for people who don't want it for religious reasons, people who don't want it for many other different regions with allergies and what have you, and you're trying to force it on them and give them no choice but to get this vaccine, even though for them it may not be the best choice, and particularly if it's a health issue. So my stance on this, and what I think a lot of these folks are getting at here, now, I mean, the side effects thing, yeah, that might be a little bit overblown, I give you that, but this whole kind of thing about political tool to control people, did you not think that maybe they're hearing from their constituents that this is being forced on them and they don't like it being forced on them? That it would prompt that. Very hyperbolic language. It wasn't the right language to use. I can give you that part of it. But you're not thinking about one of the reasons why they might be saying that. You're not even bothering to give them that credit there, that there might be a reason that they're thinking that. That maybe parents don't want to do this without being able to consult their child's doctor. That maybe people don't want to have to get something that they don't know because they have an underlying health condition, that the vaccine could be worse for them, and this is experimental and hasn't been tested on all these different things. This is still an experimental set of vaccines. None of them, as of the date of this recording, none of them have had FDA approval. Why is it right to force on people an experimental drug? That's what people are against. That's different. Wanting to not have something forced on you is something very different than being against vaccines. That is not the case with the COVID-19 vaccine, I don't think. Most of them aren't anti-vaccine. Most of them are, I don't want it forced on me. That is two different things. And you are ignoring that, Mr. Hotez, in your comments here. Let's see. These events have context. Prior to 2021, a program of anti-science disinformation that dismissed the severity of the COVID-19 pandemic was aggressively pursued by a White House committee committed to the policies of America First. The America First element of the far right focuses on nativism, anti-immigration, and foreign policy built around strong military buildup and deterrence and confrontation with China. A darker view links it to voter suppression, loyalty tests to the former president, and the question that the veracity of the 2020 election. The question of the veracity of the 2020 election. Harvard University political scientist Stephen Levitsky, co-author of How Democracies Die, point out how these elements converge to form a modern-day authoritarian regime seeking to concentrate power among a select few while limiting the reach of opposition groups. Old book there. Okay. Again, you are ignoring the fact that people want power over their own lives. And again, I would also say, what is your definition of disinformation? Is disinformation something that doesn't confirm your point of view? That is the immediate question I have for you. And if that's the case, you are not being a scientist, Mr. Hotez. I said it at the beginning. I don't think you're behaving as well as you could as a scientist because you are just saying, oh, no. You're dismissing the concerns that people have about the vaccine. You're not listening to them. And that is the problem many people have. And I'm going to get to that in a minute in more depth here because I have an overall problem with your thing here, and that you are not helping to do anything to restore trust in science as an institution with this kind of dribble that you're putting out. Let's see. Yeah, I'm also going to note that there's no reference for this at all. This is the author's opinion of what that is. I'm not going to make any comments on that. That is the author's opinion of what it goes on with Trump supporters, and I'm sure different Trump supporters here can comment themselves on whether or not they think is correct, and that I think they would disagree. But I will note that that's the author's opinion. That is not necessarily accurate here. And I will let others comment on that. Let's see. Historically, such regimes viewed scientists as the enemies of the state. In his 1941 essay, Science in the Totalitarian State, Waldemar Kempfert, I probably butchered the pronunciation, outlines details using examples of Nazism under Hitler, fascism under Mussolini, and Marxism and Leninism. For example, under Stalin, the study of genetics and relativity physics were treated as dangerous Western theories and potentially in conflict with the official social philosophies of the state. Yes, that is actually something we agree on, that was bad. In the same breath, the ideology of forcing a vaccine on somebody who doesn't want it is also an ideology, and people don't like it when other people's ideology is forced upon them. Did you not think of that? That may be part of the problem here. Today, there remain examples of authoritarian regimes who hold similar views. In 2019, the Hungarian government, under Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, took full control of the Hungarian Academy of Scientists. Yes, they shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro cut funding for Brazilian scientific institutions and universities while downplaying the severity of COVID. Okay, yes. Understandably, there are certain things that they should not have done. That's just sort of generic boilerplate. The government should not be involved in messing around with science. There should not be political influence under science either. And to be honest, I agree with his point on that. That shouldn't be involved. In fact, the RFI that the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy put out, I put in my comments on that, and one of the things I said to them was, in their commentary, they said it was about reducing improper political interference. Question: because you're saying there's an improper political interference, does that mean there's also a proper political interference in science? I would submit to you that the answer is no. There is no proper political interference allowed in science. The only thing that the government should be involved in with respect to science is setting the direction, necessarily, to say, we need answers to these kinds of questions. Like Kennedy actually did, challenging man to make it to the moon. There was a lot of research and a lot of things that had to be done to make that happen. He set the challenge. We made it happen as a scientific community, but without the direct influence and push on us of this is what exact thing you can study, and this is the conclusion that you will come to. That is the biggest problem with Marxism and the Lysenkoism that resulted, and all sorts of things there, is they dictated what the outcomes had to be. They had dictated what the physical science was, rather than letting scientists determine what the physical phenomena was, what the purport theory was, how this thing works over here, all that. Yes, so I agree with him that that's bad. That's not necessarily the issue here. That's of concern. Such activities are sometimes conducted under an alternative or replacement intellectual framework. In the book Twilight of Democracy, the seductive lure of authoritarianism, Anne Applebaum illustrates the rationale for authoritarian targeting and ultimately replacement of the intelligentsia, including the scientists. She cites the work of Julien Benda, a French essayist who in his 1927 book, The Betrayal of the Intellectuals, identifies the need to establish a core element of intellectuals to legitimize the authoritarian regime. To dismantle the legitimate scientific infrastructure, it becomes essential to create an alternative narrative. For that reason, Orbán does not close the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, but seizes control. In the 1930s and 40s, Stalin replaced Vavilov with Trofim Lysenko and his pseudoscientific theories of vernalization. Along similar lines, the rise of anti-science in an authoritarian America is notable for its intellectual cover. Experts affiliated with the far-right think tanks have adopted positions on herd immunity, vaccinations, and other COVID-19 prevention approaches that fit the America First narrative. In some cases, these views are reinforced by intellectuals on the dark web. Okay, that last, things like that with the authoritarianism and taking control of science and all this kind of stuff, that I can totally understand. Problem with this last bit here is he is ignoring that it can also happen on the left. He actually almost gets there. He almost gets there with Stalin here, because Stalin was a communist. And we do have a great deal of issues with communism and Marxism in America too. So you don't think it can, you're pointing to the right, but you're not being equally good about pointing to the problem that the left is also causing, because there are some very authoritarian people on the left too, who are all sorts of things like the experts know best. That happens a lot. And the Wall Street Journal piece the other day about the science as an institution losing the public trust, one of the main points it made was the idea that many scientists have it in their head that the expert should be in charge of everything. And that is a very prominent feature. Follow the science. Believe the science. The experts are right about everything. The experts can tell you how best to live your life. The experts will tell you what to do. The experts will tell you this. The experts will tell you that. Being against the experts being in charge of everything is not anti-science. And that's the thing here. Just because the experts say you should get a vaccine doesn't necessarily mean you will. And there's a lot of freedom there that's needed. So don't forget about the authoritarianism and the push toward the government control of everything that comes from the left also. You are ignoring that, Mr. Hotez. And that is just as much of a problem, I think. In summary, the aggression against science and scientists of America arises from three sources: far-right members of Congress, conservative news outlets, and a group of thought leaders who provide intellectual underpinnings to fuel the first two elements. For researchers working in the pandemic response to do so effectively, we seek help in halting the aggression. This is essential not only for our personal safety or national security, but also the reality that attacking science and scientists will promote illness and cause loss of life. For example, currently more than 99% of COVID-19 deaths now occur among unvaccinated people, and almost as many hospitalizations. To begin, the following steps must be considered. Okay, before I go on to the steps here, so a lot of the things here that he's pointing out, I kind of already said this. The issue is not necessarily attacking the science as much as attacking the people who are saying, because of the science, you have to get this vaccine. He's actually not listening to that at all, now that I think about it a little bit more. He's not listening to the concerns that people have about getting the vaccine. I respect his work on autism. Really, I do. And I agree. Vaccines do not cause autism. That's a conspiracy theory. Stop. Stop saying it, that happens. It doesn't. Vaccines do not cause autism. There we go. But people are concerned about putting a vaccine that is experimental in their own body, and they don't want it forced on them. That is one of the big problems right there. That's where you're getting, it's about the control, it's about the control, it's about the control. No. I'm fully on board with anybody who doesn't want to get the vaccine, because it is their personal choice in consultation with their doctor, and any concerns that they have, it's entirely up to them. I will not force it on them. And I think it is wrong for experts to force it on, to force a vaccine on people. The vaccines are probably fine. That's my thing, is I think you probably should, but it is entirely up to you, and I am not going to force you. My view on that, simple, straightforward, all about freedom. Here, because it cuts both ways, really, the authoritarian thing. You've got the authoritarian communistic left, and you've got the authoritarian right, and both of them are pretty shitty. Let's see here. For example, currently more than 99%, okay. But that's the thing. Oh, reality is attacking scientists. Okay. You have a problem with being critiqued. You have a problem with being critiqued and challenged and what have you there. And this is where I get aggravated with it, is that that's where you could very easily go with this, is that you're demanding not to be challenged. You're demanding not to be attacked. And the way you phrased it, because you put in disinformation so many times in there, and my suspicion is you mean anything that disagrees with you is disinformation. That's my suspicion, given the tone of the letter and the many negative things you're saying about the right, and you clearly have an animus toward the right, and I do believe you've written for Daily Beast and a few other things and made appearances on MSNBC and what have you, so it's quite obvious where your political bias is in this. Yeah, I just don't think you like being critiqued, is the answer there, and the interpretation there. So you got to give me your definition of what you mean by disinformation in all of this, and how you define that is kind of critical to this in the interpretation here, but you never did that. You just spouted off a piece of nonsense, is what it looks like. Let's see. The President of the United States, together with science leaders at federal agencies, should prepare and deliver a robust, public, and highly visible statement of support. The statement would reaffirm the contribution of the scientists across the United States history. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. I'll throw you a bone. That I don't mind. To be honest, that you know what it would be nice to say that you think scientists are good things. I would like to see that actually be more neutrally given, because the way it is highly charged right now, it won't be so. It won't be received so well. Let's put it that way. It will look like you are further politicizing science. And again, you can go back to the video on the peril of politicizing science if you want more of my thoughts on that. We should look at expanded protection mechanisms for scientists currently targeted by far-right extremism in the United States. Okay. Paul, right there. How about we just say extremism in the United States instead of saying far-right extremism? Because I want to tell you something, Mr. Hotez. I get a lot more flack. A lot more heartache for being conservative in academia than I ever have for being a climate scientist. Shouldn't I get some protections from the far-left extremism just as much as you want to protect from the far-right extremism? That would make a lot more sense to me than just saying far-right extremism, because you are making it very one-sided at that point. Representative Paul Tonko has introduced a bill known as the Scientific Integrity Act of 2021 to protect the U.S. government scientists from political interference. Okay, I'll give you that credit, that it should be political interference, and make sure it is both sides. Nobody, Democrat, Republican, conservative, progressive, what have you, should be interfering with science other than saying, hey, this would be a cool question to answer. That's it. But this needs to be extended for scientists at private research universities and institutions. I don't know the bill enough to actually make a comment on that one, so I gotta go read the bill itself here, but we'll see on that one. Still another possibility is to extend hate crime protections. Hold it. You want to make it a hate crime to criticize a scientist, even passionately criticizing a scientist, or in this case, as some of the political points there noted, they're not actually criticizing the science of vaccines as much as he thinks they are. They are criticizing the forcing of vaccines on people, which I think is just to criticize in a political sense. Still another, and you want to make it a hate crime to criticize scientists, to criticize government scientists, and to criticize university and research institutes too, because I gotta let you, private university and institutes too, and the reason that's a problem right there is you have to understand something. Yes, federal scientists are paid by taxpayer dollars. And indirectly, a lot of university scientists are paid by taxpayer dollars too. Because if they're getting grants from the federal government, guess where that grant money comes from? It comes from the U.S. taxpayer. So you want any criticism. You seem to want any criticism, any disagreement with the scientists to be classified as a hate crime. I hate to say it, but that's the way it comes across to me as I'm reading it, because you don't give me a definition of disinformation, but you saying everything from the right is disinformation. So basically, anybody who disagrees with you is giving disinformation, and then you want to make that a hate crime to disagree. Is that where we're going with this? You might want to clarify, Mr. Hotez, because you just spouted this off and didn't give any real clarification for anything. So again, open to interpretation here. Yeah, no, I'm not for that. I do my work. I do a lot of my research work myself as climate scientist that I am, funded by taxpayer dollars. I'm perfectly comfortable being critiqued and held accountable by anybody in the public who happens to find my work and read it. In fact, I'm on a podcast or two somewhere talking about my research, so I know I'm out there publicly for their people to criticize anyway. I'm totally fine with it. Even passionately, even if you go crazy with me, fine, go ahead, criticize it. I don't care. You know why? Because I don't take my value from them. When it crosses the line to being threats and harassment, that I can understand that that's an issue. But we already have laws on the books for that. You don't necessarily need to add more. There's no need to add more. You already have laws on the books for that. Then you can report that to your police department. You can take care of anything. You can get, say, hey, officers, can you investigate this? That's already there. You don't need another law for that. And no, it is not a hate crime to criticize, even passionately, a scientist or the scientific community or science as an institution. No, it is not. That is protected under free speech. Sorry, Mr. Hotez, you are wrong on that one, I think. As Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel pointed out, and I probably mispronounced the name, neutrality or silence favors the oppressor. We must take steps to protect our scientists and take swift and positive action to counter the growing wave of far-right anti-science aggression. Not taking action is a tacit endorsement and a guarantee that the integrity and productivity of science in the United States will be eroded or lose ground. Okay. For one thing, you presume anti-science comes from just the far right, and that is not accurate in the slightest. I've lost count of the number of lefties I've corrected with respect to climate science. So no, I'm sorry, it is not simply anti-science on the far right. You are incorrect. One of the things that strikes me with this article as a whole is a remarkable lack of introspection. Did it never occur to you, Mr. Hotez, to actually consider why some people don't trust science as an institution in the U.S. anymore? Did it never actually occur to you that there are reasons why people don't trust you? People don't trust the scientists. And not necessarily the science, because there's different studies. I'm trying to remember. It was it was Gouchat something or another 2016. He made a good point. I think that it was either Gouchat or Nathan Kaufness. I can't remember which off the top of my head. The article itself is escaping me, but it was basically made the point that being trusting of the scientific method as a process for which to answer questions, gain knowledge, find the truth about something, is completely separate from the scientist's ability and trust in the scientist's ability to implement that method faithfully. And that is one aspect in where people can stop trusting scientists, is if they think you are being biased in the implementation of the method, and you are not necessarily giving people confidence by just screaming it's all about the far right. You are not giving anybody any confidence that you yourself are actually implementing a method fairly. The scientific method fairly in an unbiased fashion and adequately. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we all have, in the Wall Street Journal article, I think pointed it out very clearly, but I'll try and summarize it here, and it's a very good point, I think. And it goes back for me on this channel with the video on elitism versus empathy. Scientists do have a tendency to think the world would be better if we were in charge, or the world would be better if everybody just listened to us. And what you fail to understand, Mr. Hotez, is that's what I see dripping in all of this. I see it dripping from here that you embody that perspective, that the experts should be listened to always, that the experts should be running everything, that if people just listen to us and follow the science, I hate that phrase, everything would be great. But that ignores a very important reality, that scientists are very human, make very human mistakes. Practicing science does not give you wisdom. There's a very big difference between science and wisdom, because science can never give you a moral compass for anything. And so you saying that experts should be in charge, we should do as the experts tell us on everything, that is open to a whole world of problems, because it assumes that the experts are infallible, perfectly moral human beings who will not misuse that power and trust that is given to them. And that is where we have gotten to with a significant portion of the population, not all, but a significant portion of the population probably doesn't trust that you are necessarily the best person to run the show. They can think that you have ideological reasons for why you are saying something that you're saying instead of what you found in the data. And you screaming about the far right being the problem enforces that. Enforces that thought that people have quite possibly. And again, I'm just spitballing some things here and things that I've observed, things from other writings that make sense. So as far as I'm concerned, again, I have not seen peer-reviewed research on this, and yet the peer-reviewed social science research seems to be somewhat skimpy on a whole bunch of questions that I've been after myself for a long time. So I make the point here, the point of this here is, have you, Mr. Hotez, if you're watching this, and I've roasted the hell out of this at this point, because I think you're failing spectacularly at being a scientist in here, have you ever once done some introspection on things that you have said, you have done, that would lead people to not trust you and think you have an ideological bent? And if you're telling me no, then you need to read this again, because you're showing it right here, that you have an ideological bent in favor of one thing over another. And that is what can make people think that you are not being unbiased when you do your own research. Do you follow what I'm saying here? You're not thinking about it carefully. I'm perfectly honest with the fact that I'm very conservative. I'm very mindful of that. I try very hard with my own research to be very unbiased, and to that end, I actually make sure very many other people from very different perspectives critique everything that I've done. I'm very careful with making sure things go through peer review. I'm very strict with myself, knowing where I am politically myself. And for the record, yes, the climate is changing. Yes, we do need to do something about it. All that good jazz. Yes, I'm not a global warming denier just because I'm conservative. No, I'm conservative, and I do think the climate is changing. We need to do something about it. Thank you very much. Let's see here. So you are presenting the ideological bias, which makes people want to distrust science to begin with. You have just screwed things over again by presenting this. And like I said, I really appreciate what you've done. I saw the research that you put in here. I really appreciate the research that you've done. But this was a very, very poor way to go about trying to improve trust in science by the public. It was a very poor way to do it. You're just showing an ideological bent. And I think people are going to be looking at your name now and probably thinking you're not objective when you do research. That you don't even try to be objective when you do research. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying what I think other people may think. But yeah, I'm sorry. A little introspection is what needs to happen right now on the part of all the folks who are screaming, why don't people trust the experts? Why is there so much venom against scientists right now? You need to do a little introspection just as much as you are looking at things outside. And according to psychology, externalization is a feature there where people can just, it's very easy to externalize a problem. It's very hard to think about it, what's going on inside yourself or in your own kind of field or what have you. And there needs to be a lot of that introspection with respect to public health right now, as far as I'm concerned, but also with respect to different scientists and communities, because there has been a lot of trust lost. And I do think it has to do with things like this, where you're saying the experts are right all the time. That's what I get here, because, and he's also missed the point, because as I said before, the politicians that he's citing aren't necessarily against the vaccine. They don't necessarily think the vaccine was poorly made or anything like that. They think that people shouldn't be forced to take the vaccine. And that is a different thing. You can believe in the science, you can think that the science was done well and that the vaccine is great. And I do think it's amazing. It's stunning that we ended up with 3 vaccines, in less than a year after the start of a pandemic. That is fantastic. But that doesn't make it right to force it on people. There's a big difference there. And saying that and that's where I get to it with this, is that the experts are saying, take the vaccine, take the vaccine, take the vaccine, and you're trying to force it down people's throats so that people take the vaccine. Well, yeah, Americans don't like having stuff forced on them. Did you think of that? Did you think of that and look at it more carefully and what have you? And admittedly, people like Leanna Wen, who are saying, no, we can't be reasonable and Bill de Blasio saying we got to force things on people and what have you. There, you have to be careful not to conflate attacking the science with attacking the political part of it with attacking the science. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But it's really discouraging to see this coming from a scientist. I am very, very disappointed with Dr. Hotez here, because I'm sure he's brilliant at what he does, but this was a great way to shoot public trust in the foot, to say that you as a scientist are putting your stake in the ground to say, I want attacks on scientists to be labeled as hate crimes. You are missing the point. You're really missing the point about why there's a significant portion of the population that doesn't trust science and doesn't trust the public health experts right now. And that's incredibly disappointing, because you could have used this as an opportunity to address that and say, hey, here's what we can do, and this is what actually goes on, and yeah, that wouldn't have made a nice clickbait headline, but it would have been a little bit more, it would have been more helpful to the situation right now. So yeah, seriously, some introspection would be a good thing. And I want to point this out because this is the other problem. So this is the author himself, his citation. This is one peer-reviewed article. This is a newspaper article. This is a newspaper article. This is a newspaper article. This is from him. This is a newspaper article. In fact, it's still on. This is a book. That's a book. That's from him. That's a book. So there's maybe 4 of these 12 things that are either peer-reviewed articles or books that he's citing here. The rest of this is journal. Rest of this is newspaper articles or stuff of his own voice, and some of the stuff of his own voice too. That's also published in newspapers. So I'm sorry. I don't think very much of this, and I do think you're being woefully ideological and not thinking about the reasons why people don't want to have a vaccine forced in their arm, which would then prompt a whole collection of representatives of the people who are probably hearing from their constituents that they don't want this forced on them to say such things as they have. So, a little introspection, seriously, is what needs to happen on the part of the many who are saying, why don't people trust us? And there's these anti-science attacks. Well, did you think about what you did? That's it. That's my commentary on the subject, and find it disappointing, this article. But we'll see here. I know there's comments, but I'm not going to read that here from readers. So I'll leave this linked in the description. If you all want to go make a comment, I encourage you to go make a comment. This is my public-facing comment here. That's it for now. If you like this video, I hope you share the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good jazz. You can also find me over at SciWorthy.locals.com, where I am a supporter there. So if you become a supporter, then you can catch up with me there too. Locals is free to join, but if you want to, and you can see things and you can like posts, but if you want to share content and comment on content and things like that, you have to become a supporter. So I encourage you to do that. Come on over to SciWorthy.locals.com and join us there. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Adrian. Stay curious, my friends.